A lot has been changing in the Middle East in recent years, from a potential rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran to China's evolving influence in the region. Meanwhile, the EU Parliament elections have confirmed Brussels' political emphasis on issues such as economic security and migration. No big changes here. The challenge is for the policymaking community to understand where the EU's interest lies and what role it can play. The EU's approach to IMEC cannot be designed in Washington or in Riyadh. Its interests will not perfectly align with that of the US, whether there's Trump or a Democrat in the White House. But we can expect a more balanced approach, if not compatible to some extent, from potential Democratic nominees, especially after Biden's unpopular Middle East policies. China will continue to do what China does in the Middle East, which is to invest in consistent political partnerships, including with Gulf countries, and to invest economic resources in a market-driven approach. Both India and China control a number of connectivity hubs along the IMEC route, and India is seeking to stabilize its relations with China. The conclusion is that IMEC and China cannot be fully disconnected. A coherent way for China to engage with IMEC would be to try and procure infrastructure for the project, and later to use its routes to support Chinese exports to Europe, for example. In terms of diplomatic power, China takes advantage of the damaged sustainability and trust in both Euro-Mediterranean and US-Middle East relations. The first step is to raise awareness among European policymakers of the current design of IMEC as detrimental to the EU's political priorities. To explain that this so-called profit-driven scenario would lead to further destabilization in the region, not to the intended profit and not to more secure supply chains. Second, IMEC and the Middle East peace process have to be meaningfully connected. The EU could push for a diversification of the IMEC route in its southern neighborhood, to include a future state of Palestine, as well as secondary connections to additional countries. That brings me to a third policy change, which is to renew the vision for Euro-Mediterranean partnerships, taking into account the political economy of partner countries and going beyond a narrow focus on migration discourse. I can share two. One is the no IMEC scenario. Let's say IMEC never happens. From the EU's perspective, that is not good. Long story short, many foresight participants from the other side of the Mediterranean found it was not so absurd, because IMEC with its current design is not desirable. In fact, it could increase existing tensions and inequalities in the region. Another wake-up call and conclusion is that we were not able to address practical, strategic cooperation issues about the IMEC project, whether it's India's digital governance or the Gulf's hydrogen market. As long as there isn't a unified response from the EU and member states to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, which has escalated into a plausible genocide or new Nakba, it is simply unproductive to move on to these questions.